change and novelties, I think, really affects our relationships as well. I see people, switching friends, people switch spouses, church memberships, etc., like commodities. And as a result, we struggle. We struggle with commitment. We struggle with our convictions of what's right and wrong. I mean, that's the world we live in, right? We struggle in making critical decisions. I don't know, I can't make up my mind, But more importantly, I feel like as a result of this fast-paced world where things are constantly changing, we struggle with our faith in God. We struggle with our faith in God, our trust in Him, our commitment to Him. In a way, we have become unstable in all our ways. And that's what James warns us about. In James chapter 1, he says, "For the one who doubts is like the surf of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For that man ought not to expect that he will receive anything from the Lord, being a double-minded person, unstable in all his ways." Faithfulness is critical to our relationships, and especially our relationship with God. Now, I'm not saying that we can't change jobs or that we shouldn't enjoy novelties. I'm saying that the times that we live in is prone to watering down our faith, instilling doubts in us about ourselves and each other and God. And therefore, we must increase in our vigilance in abiding in Christ, so that faithfulness can flow out of us. It used to be that faithfulness was something that was, that a lot of people espouse or adhere to, but today it's no longer that much of a virtue, it seems like. If we want faithfulness to flow out of us, we must abide in Christ. And that is a reality, and that is the reality. Furthermore, faithfulness is one of the most important characteristics of who God is. And after giving Moses the 10 Commandments, God tells Moses this truth about himself. If you think back, God was actually introducing himself to humanity once again through Moses. Okay? And this is how he introduced himself. He says, "No, therefore," after giving the law to Moses and to his people, he says, "No, therefore," let's read it together. "Know therefore that the Lord your God, He is God, the faithful God, who keeps His covenant and His loving kindness to 1,000th generation with those who love Him and keep His commandments." This is who God is. I mean, God has a lot of different characteristics, but first and foremost, He is a God who is full with grace and loving kindness. And that's how He introduced Himself. "I am the God of loving kindness, who shows His kindness to the 1,000th generation." And then He says, "No, not only am I God, I am a faithful God. I am faithful. That's who I am." And that's what you need to remember. We must know and understand that God, not only is He God, but He is also faithful. If you don't remember anything, remember this, that God is faithful. Because then it will go a long way in helping us bear faithfulness as part of our fruit as well. So what does it mean for God to be faithful? What does faithfulness look like? And that's what I want to spend some time this afternoon to think about. Okay, some key characteristics of faithfulness, especially as it comes to God, that at least 3 characteristics. Okay, and faithfulness can be defined as having profound convictions, persistent commitment, proven character. Profound convictions, persistent commitment, proven character. First, let's talk about profound convictions. Convictions are the principles that you live by, okay? What you believe deep in your core, in your heart, in your gut. What you believe to be right and wrong. Remember, we talked about that last week. Your convictions or moral principles, they're different from the civic laws that we abide by or popular cultural norms, right? The law might say don't cheat on your taxes, but if that's not your deep conviction, you will still cheat on your taxes, even though you may get into trouble. Okay? The culture might say that you may live in a culture where everyone eats with their chopsticks, but if your conviction says that sushi must be eaten with my fingers only, and which is true, sushi is a finger food. Did you know that? You're supposed to eat it with your fingers. If that's your conviction, you will continue to suck on your fingers while everybody is staring at you. All right? Because that's your conviction, even though the culture says otherwise. God clearly has profound convictions. And he calls them what? The 10 Commandments. They're his moral laws. They don't change with culture, and they don't change with time. Okay? Those are his deep convictions, or he calls them his commandments to us because those are his deep convictions for us, for our good, for our sake. And so he gives it to them. And that's why think about it, he literally wrote them on stones. That's where the saying, it's written on stones, comes from, by the way, okay? He wrote his commandments on stones because he's basically saying they don't change. You cannot change them. And it will not change. So what are God's profound convictions? I tested you on that last week, remember? God's profound convictions, what are they? First commandment was what? You shall have what? No other gods. Okay, good. Second one is what? Don't make an image or don't worship idols, right? Because when we're creating an image, a graven idol, we are essentially worshiping idols, right? When we create an image. Number 3 is what? Don't take the name of the Lord in vain. In essence, take God seriously. Right? Take God seriously. No, it's not just, don't curse, don't use the name of Jesus in vain. That's not just that. It is taking God seriously. That's really what this 3rd commandment is about. Take his character, his holiness, his name. Right? His name is really identified by his character is defined by his name. Don't take his name in vain. Take him seriously. Number 4 is what? Keep the Sabbath, keep the Sabbath holy. Right? Make sure you rest. Number 5, honor your father and mother. Number 6, don't kill. Don't even hate. Right? Jesus redefined it or actually went a little bit further and deeper. He says, if you harbor hate in your heart, you have committed murder. Right? Number 7, eat chocolate every day. Right? Oh, wait, no, that's mine. But what is number 7? Don't commit adultery. Not even in your heart. If you lust after another person in your heart, you have already committed adultery. Number 8. Do not steal. Right? So cheating on your taxes is no longer just a civic law. It is a moral law. Number 9 is what? Don't give false testimony against your neighbor. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Don't speak evil of others behind their back. Really, that's what it is. And then finally, do not covet anything that belongs to your neighbor. Don't compare. Okay, don't judge. Don't let jealousy overcome you. So, are these your deep convictions as well? If not, why not? And I'm not saying this to make you feel guilty, but all of us have convictions. What are your deep convictions that you live by? What do you truly believe to be right and wrong? So I'm going to give you a few minutes to maybe think about this. Out of the 10 commandments, which convictions are most unpopular among your peers or culture? Okay, I'm going to give you what Daniel is saying, all 10 of them. Pick a few, okay? Which are most unpopular today among your peers or culture? And knowing that God's 10 commandments are really designed for our good, which commandment, if you implemented ASAP, would transform your relationships? Think about that. Okay, I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Turn to the person next to you. Just process a little bit, okay? I don't want you to fall asleep, so 5 minutes. Come on. Turn to the person next to you. All right. All right. So which one, maybe we can come to a consensus, are most unpopular right now in today's time? Number 7, do not commit adultery. Is that, do you all agree on that with that? Hmm?
I think the question is like, does number 7 apply only to married people, or is it also?
No, of course not. Yeah. Well, adultery would be, because God designed sex. Okay, the way God designed sex, it is within the marriage context. And so anything outside of marriage, according to Scripture, would be considered adultery in that sense, right? And so is that why you said no, number 7? Who was it that said that? Joel. So you think sex, the whole promiscuity, the whole, where last week we talked about smash around, all right, the whole hooking up, is that why it's so popular right now? Because so in other words, if you tell people don't smash around, don't hook up, you're being a bigot. So that's why it's very unpopular. Is that what you're saying? Okay. Do the rest of you agree?
I'm not at number 4 because I feel like that kind of gets
Ooh. Okay.
in the Old Testament, they told Moses to stone him to death for not keeping the Sabbath.
Yeah. That's probably true among maybe Christians because we don't know how to keep the Sabbath. But in terms of the culture and the world, they don't know anything about the Sabbath, right? But that's good. That's good. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Rat race. Uh-huh.
I think number 2 and number 1 is the most common.
People have idols.
Everywhere,
Huh.
self-image or
True. So if you tell people today that there's only one God, one true God, people will definitely crucify you or at least throw stones at you, right? Oh no, how can you say your God is the only God? There are many ways to God. It's true, yeah? Very good. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. That's right. And like I said, it's not just using God's name in vain. It is really not taking God seriously when we are just making fun of God. I mean, the movies, it's crazy. It's really crazy. You were going to say, Jeremy? Mm-hmm. That's right. That's the America we live in. And where you have a country that was built and born out of Christian values, right? I mean, you know your history to a certain degree, right? I mean, America was really, I mean, the pilgrims who came, they were fleeing or running away from persecution in Europe, and they came to America. And so they build, this country based on their Christian values. Now, as a country, like Jeremy said, some people don't even, probably have never heard the gospel. It's very good, very good. So you didn't talk about the second one, which one would transform your relationships if you were to implement it ASAP. Did you talk about that? Mm-hmm. I think for each of those commandments or these principles, you can go so deep with them and go really, and because it's not at face value; those are just words. But then, if you really go deep, and that's what Jesus did, right? He says, committing murder is not just going killing someone. Committing murder is really if you hate someone in your heart and you curse someone, you have already committed murder. Right? Adultery is not just the act itself, sleeping with another person outside of marriage. Is when you lust, you have committed adultery. Right? Giving false testimony is not just lying. It is not just lying. If I'm hurt, and I've done that, okay? If I'm hurt and I go talk to Scott about the other person and I speak evil of that person, I'm giving false testimony because I really don't know. Right? When I'm gossiping, it falls within that as well. Think of that. So which ones, if you were to implement it ASAP, would transform your relationships today? Did you guys talk about it, Scott? Yeah. And?
I chose 10. Well, no, Lawrence chose 10, and I agreed with him. He said to comparison, it's your neighbor. I think if a lot of people were to not compare and instead lift each other up, our relationships would be a lot better.
Very good. Yeah, it's true. It's true. So many relational issues have to do with comparing, jealousy. Jealousy is huge. It's really a yeast. Once you have this yeast, it's in the lump of dough. It's so hard to get rid of it. People being jealous of each other, comparing, and now you have cliques, right? You have groups here and there talking about each other, and oh yeah. So anyway, those are God's. I call them profound. Yeah, go ahead, Gene.
We were talking about do not commit adultery, and we were talking about how it came about in the 60s. That before that, we had Christian values in the United States, and I remember growing up in the church and then going to college, and then everyone's having sex, and that sort of goes to do not covet anything that belongs to your neighbor, because hey, everyone else, all my peer group is doing it, and you covet what your peer group is doing it. So.
And really, the reason why our culture is so against it, and over time, and at some point in our history, at least the history of America, I think everybody on Sunday used to go to church, and to a certain degree, everybody would agree, but eventually, as we kept teaching the Ten Commandments, we did it in such a religious way, right? In such an adamant way that we would teach it without really explaining why this is good for us. And we would just say, just don't do it. And people got turned off. And you know how we are human beings, we go from one extreme to the other. And if I don't understand it, I'm just going to go, oh man, you're just being legalistic. And truly, church at some point, we've lost our way. We've become very legalistic. Just like during Jesus' time, the Pharisees were very legalistic. And that turned a lot of people off, especially young adults. They'll go to college and after, no, they grew up in church and they're being taught, don't do this, don't do that. And then they go off to college and the professor will give them some different perspective. Oh, yeah, I never thought about it. And it's like, oh, man, yeah, I don't need to go to church. And that's why young adults just leave the church. So when we talk about these things here, I think it's important for us to realize these are, it's really there for our good. And we have to think for ourselves, will I take those commandments as my convictions in life? You have a choice. Will there be your convictions? Can there be your convictions? Are you willing to have those as your deep convictions, what's right and wrong? And it is important because it will determine how you will commit. It will affect your commitments. So that's why I want to talk about persistent commitment, okay? Did you notice how, people have become allergic in our days to making commitments? They sneeze at commitment, pun intended. They really do. I don't want to make commitments. I don't want to get married. I don't want to be tied down to only one person. I don't want to be tied down to just one job. I don't want to just commit to a church. We're so used to having a lot of choices that we don't want to limit ourselves by making commitments. And that's why, at one point, all-you-can-eat buffets were so popular. And in some cases, in some ways, it still is, right? Or they're still very popular. Because, we don't want to just be tied down to one dish. And I want to try everything. Just in case I might miss out, right? I want to try everything. Now, we can do that with our meals, with our food, but you can't do that with your relationships. What would happen to your relationships if you treated them like an all-you-can-eat buffet? Uncommitted friends produce shallow friendships. Uncommitted parents produce very insecure children. Uncommitted spouse will produce broken families. Uncommitted leaders produce indifferent and cynical followers. Uncommitted believers produce immature and consumeristic Christians. And the list goes on and on. However, nowadays, you see, the issue is not just a lack of commitment, it is persistence. Persistence in our commitment. Too often when we do make commitments, we make them so lightly, as if they're just words and feelings, right? At weddings, couples often craft beautiful, commitments to each other. I've done a lot of weddings, okay? And I have a standard, vows that people can make, or some people would choose to craft their own vows, right? But the traditional vow is, I commit to love you, I commit to serve you and honor you, to be to be faithful to you and to love you in sickness and health, poverty and wealth, until death do us part. It is so romantic, and yet look at how many couples today who have said these words are divorced. They're apart, all right, but still very much alive. Many believers, in their excitement of joining a new church, would say to their pastor, "Oh, I love this church. I love your church. I love those sermons. I am committed to grow at this church and to make it into my own spiritual family." And then at the slightest, conflict, they leave. As soon as a conflict, they leave. Where did the commitment go? Or you have new believers who can be so on fire for God. They will quickly say, "I commit to read the Bible every day and to love Jesus with all my heart, with all my mind, and with all my soul." And then over time, their love grows cold and their Bible gathers dust. We can commit, but are we persistent and steadfast in our commitment? That's really the question. Especially when the commitment is hard or cost us something. It's like the story of the pig and the chicken. I like to use animals as illustrations. You've heard of this story, no? A pig and a chicken decide to go into business, right? Have you heard of that story? Oh, okay. And you know, they want to go into business together and start a restaurant. So they were both committed, but only the chicken persisted in its commitment. Why? Because they called the restaurant Ham and Eggs. The chicken only had to provide eggs, the pig had to die for his commitment. Obviously, not all commitments are equal, right? There are short-term commitments and then long-term commitments. You have light commitments based on your preferences, like being faithful to coffee or tea, or the brand of coffee or brand of tea. And then you have serious commitments based on your profound convictions, like being faithful to your spouse. And then there are commitments that you don't necessarily have to insist, okay? You don't have to insist. But then there are commitments that you must persist, even if it costs your life. There are commitments that you will have to persist and be willing to give your life to. And those are the commitments that we're talking about here. Faithfulness. The Bible talks about the fruit of the Spirit, the aspect of it where it is, the faithfulness aspect of it has to do with commitments where you're willing to give your life to. And if you think about it, that's what Jesus personified or did. Right? That's the faithfulness that Jesus was committed to us with. His commitment to love us caused him to die on the cross because he persisted in his commitment, or in other words for it is covenant. The biblical word for it is covenant. He persisted in his covenant with us. God so loved his children. He was so committed to loving us that he died on the cross so that we would not perish but have everlasting life. And that is why God told Moses, "Know therefore that the Lord your God, he is not just God, he is the faithful God." He is faithful. As a believer, think about it, as a believer, what persistent commitment is God asking us to make? What is God asking you to make in terms of commitment that you need to persist, even to the point of giving your life to? Have you made those commitments? Why or why not? Now, I'll give you some time to reflect on those questions later, but first let's talk about proven character. Proven character. Your character really is who you really are, the real you. That's your character. That's not the same thing as your personality or your temperament, okay? Your personality or temperament has to do with your natural preferences in behavior and how you naturally respond to situations or people. Your character is who you are when no one is watching, who you are in the dark, who you are when you're alone. That's who you are. That's your character. Character is also not the same thing as reputation. Reputation is what others think of you or what you think of yourself, okay? So that is not the same thing because you can have great reputation but a terrible character. Integrity is when your character matches your reputation. Integrity is when your character matches your reputation. And another term for it is proven character. Now, some people think that our proven character is the one thing we can take with us after we die. I'm not sure. But you know, if that's true, I would want to work on it, right? Now, you know what else? What else we can do with our proven character? You know what else we can do? We can pass it on to our children. Our children are like tape recorders. And oftentimes we pass on our character, our proven character, to our children. They see everything. Our kids see everything. If you have proven character, they will know it, and eventually they will emulate it. You know, one time before giving a test to his class, a trigonometry teacher said to his class, "Today I am going to give you two tests. One on trigonometry and the other on your character. If you fail, I hope," he said, and the teacher said, "I hope you will pass both of these tests. But if you must fail one, let it be trigonometry. Because if you fail in trigonometry, you can still have great and successful relationships in your life. But if you fail in your character, expect also to fail in your relationships throughout your life." It is true, isn't it? When character fails to be proven, you know, trust is broken. And how can you have good relationships without trust? You can't. When trust is broken, it takes a lot of work to rebuild it. And I'm sure that you all have experienced being, you know, lied to. And what happens after you found out that this person lied to you? What happens? You find out that someone lied to you. What happens to you? You get hurt, right? You're hurt. And the next time that person tells you something, I mean, you could reconcile. Eventually, you might reconcile. But the next time that person tells you something, you're not so sure anymore whether you should believe that person or not, because trust has been broken. So you can't really have good and healthy and successful relationships if there is no trust. Would you trust someone with a shady character? Of course not. Would you trust your money, your business, your kids to someone who has a shady character? When God says to us, "Trust me, have faith in me," it is based on His proven character. Right? God calls us to trust in Him, to believe in Him, to trust Him, and it is based on His proven character. God says what He means, and He does what He says. Not only is He God, He is the faithful God. He is trustworthy. And because He is trustworthy, then we can have the confidence to trust Him and to be faithful to Him. And I wasn't going to share this, but earlier over lunch I was telling Jenny about my father, because the question was, who do you think name one person you think is faithful, and I thought of my father right away, and truly he is. He is very faithful to God, very faithful to God. But it is for good reasons. He is faithful to God because God showed Himself to be faithful to him. 3 times, at least 3 times in his life, God saved him, literally saved him. Okay? When he was newborn, when he was first born in his village, 7 other kids were born in the village, same time, and they all contracted the same disease, and they were all condemned to die. And someone shared the gospel with my grandfather, and he said, if you pray to this God, this God can save your son. And my grandfather prayed to him, and all the kids died except for my father. So that was the first time God saved him. Okay? The second time was I think he was very ill at one point. He had a very, very bad health because he grew up very, very poor. He grew up in starvation, and it affected his liver, his everything. And one time he almost didn't make it. But by faith, he prayed to God, and God healed him, and he was saved. The third time, and he shared with me that that instance was when he first moved to Hong Kong. He was penniless, he was homeless, living, sleeping in people's stairway and in entrances, right? Because then during wintertime, some warm air could come out, and keeping himself warm. In the summertime, he would sleep on the beach. And one time, someone woke him up and said, "No, wake up, son, otherwise you'll drown," because the tide was coming in. And so he woke up and he looked around, nobody was there, and the tide was coming in, so he almost drowned, and he was saved. And at that time, he realized it was an angel who woke him up and called him son, wake up. So that was another time he was saved. And I'm sure there were other times, but because of that, he was so faithful to God. And I was sharing how he worked on this ship for almost 10 years as a seaman. And seamen, as soon as they dock in a port, the first thing they do, typically, what do seamen do when they dock in a port? Typically, they go look for prostitutes, right? Because they're very lonely or whatever on the ship for months. But not my father. The first thing he would do is look for a church to go and worship. And as a result, he got to know pastors, churches from all over the world, because his Norwegian ship went throughout the world. He visited pretty much every continent, lots of countries, and he knows pastors from all over the world. And so when he opened a restaurant in Paris, we would constantly have pastors coming to eat. And I didn't know, as a kid, I didn't know who they were. I said, "Dad, how do you know all these pastors?" And that's when he told me, I know them from my time as a seaman when I used to travel, and I would go to their church to worship. That's how faithful he was to God. But his faithfulness was really born out of God's faithfulness to him. Has God been faithful to you? Do you trust him as a faithful God? Have you experienced his faithfulness? If you have not, it'll be hard for you to really be faithful to God and to commit to the things of God. God is faithful. He is not just God. He is the faithful God. Do you trust that? Do you believe that? I promise to give you some time to reflect. As a believer, what persistent commitment is God asking us to make? Have you made those commitments? Why or why not? And what is one habit that you can develop to help you be more faithful as a person? Okay? So let's think about these two questions. Okay, and then we'll come back to talk about it some more. But I'm going to give you about 5-10 minutes to just talk about these two questions. Same thing, turn to the person next to you. As a believer, what persistent commitment is God asking us to make? I mean, we have different levels of biblical knowledge here. So, but if you've read the Bible, you should have at least some answers, right? What do you think God is asking us to commit to that we need to persist in? Turn to the person next to you and let's talk about it. And I'm not just talking about any commitment. Remember I said, there are different types of commitment, right? But we're talking about persistent commitment, commitments that you would give your life to. What are some of those commitments that God is asking us to make? Anybody? What did you share in your group? I heard you guys.
Oh yeah, so we talked about it. You wanna share a little bit?
Always.
Okay, me? Okay. So we talked about going to church and then as being kind of the first step and being consistent in going to church. And then secondly, being more in the Word and in prayer and not seeing it as a duty or an obligation, but seeing it as something that we want to do, like we talked about last week, changing our appetite for God. And then we started talking about churches and like it's easy to go into a church and then say, oh, I don't like this, like, or something didn't sit well with me, or the worship is not my style, things like that, and then walk away. And we're just talking more about what it means to be committed to a church and really seeing it as the body of Christ. And then if people walk away, then it's like you're chopping off parts of the body that need to be there. But yeah, so that's a little bit what we were talking about.
Okay. How about behind? What did you guys talk about?
Life can get very busy, especially with family and job and career. And, I've just been feeling tired and, I don't know, kind of exhausted lately. So I've kind of missed my early morning devotional times. So for me, it's just been, making that commitment to go to bed earlier so that I can wake up earlier to have that alone time with the Lord every morning, and really make, in a practical way, make God my number one priority.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Justin, Pastor Justin, what did you?
I think the commitment was to more abiding in the Word, and specifically for like the habit is to start my day off abiding in the Word. Like the Brad group's been super helpful with the devotional, but I haven't been super consistent. I've just kind of noticed that the days that I don't start off with it, it really sets the tone for the day.
Yeah.
And there's like, more distractions or temptations that come up that I would normally like brush off pretty easily, but when I don't start my day off with that devotional and abiding in the Word, it's not as easy. And so that's really the commitment to make.
Okay, very good. Anything different on this side? Okay, Andy, go ahead.
So I kind of I do the brag, even though you don't know, because I don't do the last portion, which I know, because it's been so easy to just listen to it. So starting the day has been great, but I find myself ending the day needing to kind of be in God's presence, because what the things that happen throughout the day, I may take, like if I experience failures, I take it very personally and very deeply. So I have been spending a lot of time with God, trying to at least every other day with God, so that I can give my worries, my burdens to God, so that I can end the day with less anxiety. So yeah, that's one commitment that I really need to make every day, not every other day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's very interesting that when it comes to, I guess because everything I've heard so far really has to do with number two, right? What is one habit or some habit you can develop? Abiding in His Word, prayer, going to church. And that's really why I have those questions here. As far as, persistent commitment that you would give your life to, I really haven't heard anything to that. Okay, you guys have something. Go ahead.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you. I was just going to add another thing that we talked about. So something that came to mind that we were talking about with this question is a verse in, I'm going to expose myself here, like John or Luke, where it talked about being a pillar of salt and light. And so I think the perception of us as Christians and people who represent Jesus is probably a commitment, I think, that God asks of us pretty often. and it's kind of going out and showing everybody else not just about the Ten Commandments, right?
Right.
Like not using the Lord's name in vain, but also how well we can all portray Jesus' forgiveness and some of his desires for the world.
Yes, your testimony.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. And I think that's a really hard commitment to make, and it's got a lot of elements in it too, but it's probably a pretty key one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing this, because this is really where I am going with. Okay, because when we think of commitment, we often think of list of do's and don'ts, and even the Ten Commandments. We can look at it as a list of do's and don'ts, and that's where we get into trouble. Okay, and that's where the church got into trouble, where we are now becoming very legalistic. Pray more, read the Bible more, be consistent in reading the Bible. And if you don't, then you should feel guilty and you should feel ashamed. And that's where we get into trouble. I think ultimately what God is, if you think about it, right, first of all, what is the most important commitment that God is asking us to make? And it has to do with our salvation. Trust or faith in God. It's a commitment to trust Jesus. Would you give your life for that commitment? Well, you should. If you're a believer, you should be committed to trust God. Have you ever thought about that? That's what it means to have faith in God. Do I trust Jesus? Am I committed to trusting Him? What about the great commandment? To love the Lord your God with all your heart. Are you committed to love God with all your heart? And are you willing to die for that? That's what I'm looking for in terms of believers, for myself. That's what I want for myself. I want to love God, and I'm committed to that. What about the Great Commission? To go and make disciples of all nations. Are you committed to making disciples? Have you ever thought about that? It is a commitment that we have to make. I give up my career at IBM just so that I can go and make disciples. Because now I want to put my, my foot where I'm betting the whole farm on it. That's what to me, that's what's meaningful. To obey God in that sense, to make disciples of all nations. That's why we started the bridge. Regardless of how difficult it is, we're committed. We're committed. Those are the type of commitments I want us to think about, not the list of do's and don'ts. Okay? And I'm glad we were able to talk about it because it's really oftentimes when we think of commitment, we're just thinking about do's and don'ts. Are you committed to God as your God, to trust Him, to live for Him? At the end of your life, Jesus told the parables, right, of the talents. God will come in judgment, and everybody will give an account. And the one with the 10 talents said, God says, good and faithful. Or was his 5 talents? Good and faithful servant. You're faithful. And that's really what it means to be faithful. To use the gifts that God has given us. Are you committed to that? That's another commitment we have to make to God. God, I am committed to all the gifts, the talents you have given to me, so that one day when you come and ask me for an account, you will call me faithful servant. Are you committed to serve God with your gifts and talents? Because the one who just went and buried the gift and did nothing out of fear, God calls him wicked. He was not committed to anything. And that's what I wanted us to think about. What are some persistent commitments that God is asking you to make? And have you made those commitments? Because if you do, and you persist in it, then God will call you good and faithful. And we all want to be faithful. But like I said, I can't do it on my own. We cannot do it on our own. We need to develop those habits of abiding in Christ, abiding in His Word, abiding in obedience, abiding in love, in His love, and abiding in prayer. Yes, those are just habits that we can develop. But in terms of commitment, it's what we've talked about. Have you made those commitments? For those of you who are married, you stood before your spouse and you committed to love your spouse. That's a commitment. And one day if you get married, you'll have to make that commitment as well. It's a commitment you want to persist, give your life for. Have you made commitments to God? To love Him, to serve Him, to live for Him, to trust Him, and be willing to die for those commitments, so that one day you can be called faithful. Let's pray. Father, thank you. Thank you for your word, for your reminder.